Call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Jenks City Council. Today is Tuesday, September 21st of 2021. My name is Corey Box, and I'll be your chair for this evening. We are underway at 5, a little bit late, but apologize to all of you that have been here. We finished at the very last minute on our previous meeting. So with that being said, Mr. Macy, can you please verify our attendance?
Klein. Present. Short. OJ. Kaylin. Isabel. Here. Murray. Here. Mayor Box.
Here, record reflect that councilors Lynn and Short are absent this evening. Okay, and for tonight's invocation, I'd like to invite Pastor Ethan Jacobson to come forward. And Pastor, if you would take a moment to tell us about your church, your mission, what you guys do, and then we'll pray.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We're a new church, about 4 years old. We get to celebrate that this coming Sunday. Many of you might know of us for our food distribution outreach that we have just down the street from this location on G Street. And our mission is simple. It's to help reach people where they're at and take them from the place they're at into the fullness of life that we believe that Christ has for all of us. And so we do that by partnering with a number of different agencies, churches throughout our city and throughout the surrounding areas. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And,
oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say our Sunday service is just down the street in Glenpool in a brand new location at 151st and Elwood. We'd love for you guys to come and celebrate this year as we celebrate 4 years on Sunday at 10 o'clock. So hopefully I might be able to see some of you guys. But if you would stand and let's just bring this meeting to the presence of the one who holds it all. Father God, we thank you for today. We thank you for the opportunity, Lord, to do your business today. Father, we just thank you for all of our city leaders that are here assembled before us, the members of our city. Lord, we thank you that they're here to bring petitions before this council tonight. Father, we thank you right now, Lord, for all of our firefighters, for our police officers. We pray protection over each and every one of them, their families, Lord, as they are going out and serving this community. Lord, we thank you right now that you have the answers to everything that lays before us. And Father, we pray for wisdom and knowledge for each and every one of us as we humble ourselves and come before those that you have established authority on the earth through. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pastor. Okay, at this point, we're open the floor to any citizens' comments.
Anything that's not on the agenda.
Nobody comes up, we don't need to. Anybody at all? As long as it's not related to an agenda item.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry. I wasn't going to say it unless somebody came up. Yeah, you're right. I probably should educate them. Okay, business item number 1. Consideration and appropriate action relating to a request for approval of the consent agenda.
Mayor, I would request that we pull item F. We will bring that before the council in October.
Very well. Item F is pulled. Entertain a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda with the exception of letter F.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a proper motion and second. Let's vote, please.
Klein. Yes. OJ.
Yes.
Isabel. Yes. Murray. Yes. Mayor Box.
Yes. Item F be tabled to October?
Yes.
Okay, great. Number 2, done. All right. Number 3. JZ 21 PUD 130 request by Bell Land Use, a zone change from agriculture to planned unit development 130 with an underlying zoning of CS for commercial shopping, general location being 9330 South Elwood Avenue. We are on page 84 if anybody wants to follow along, and our presenter is Mrs. Hilton. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, and staff. This item was heard by the Planning Commission on April 9th, 2021. And at that time, it was approved 6-1 with one member being absent. So just so you know that going into it. The applicant is Mr. Bell, and he's representing to the Osgold Development Group, and they have been looking at a piece of property. They came in several months ago to talk to staff about this particular parcel. It is currently zoned ag. It is a single-family residential dwelling. It does have some livestock on it currently. If you were to drive by, Sound Lake Villas is further to the west, and then you have the Simmons group that did the commercial for the office development along Elwood. So we're north of Main Street and west of Elwood and across the street from the golf course. During the Planning Commission hearing, there were multiple concerns brought up, and there were many emails exchanged prior to the hearing from the public and forwarded on to staff, other staff, and to City Council. Many of the concerns were drainage, privacy, fence height, materials used for that screening, concerns for light pollution, second-story windows, building setback from residential lots, landscaping, building height, residential building aesthetics, materials, and style. In the introductory part of the meeting, I brought to the attention of the Planning Commission and the public that Mr. Bell had met on site with Mr. Chris Cloyd, our city engineer, and they had discussed the drainage and which direction the drainage would flow. And Mr. Cloyd made it clear to the applicant that all the drainage would be taken to Elwood, that none of the drainage would go west towards the residential development. And since that time, I walked the area, not the north lot, but the Smithco lots. There are 2 lots to the south. I walked that myself. Staff has been out there multiple times. Mr. Cloyd and I walked it again today, looked at the lots, looked at the direction, everything kind of lies right now, and had some conversation. During the Planning Commission hearing, when it was made known that the drainage would go towards Elwood rather than the residential area, it did seem to relieve a lot of the concerns from the public. So that being said, it was approved 6-1. So the conditions placed on the applicant by the Planning Commission and myself are as follows. Planning is required. Add PUD to the front of the PUD document. On page 6, add the following prohibitions. Medical marijuana grow facilities would not be something allowed. Use unit 1, 16, and 19 would have been allowed by right in a CS, and we struck all 3 of those for different reasons. 16 and 19 was asked by one of our residents, and they were more than happy to go ahead and strike those on behalf of the public. On page 7, correct as follows: no additional ground signs shall be allowed outside of the development sign, and that is along Elwood. On page 85 of 152, landscaping adjacent to the residential property line is required, including a minimum of 1 2-inch caliber tree approved. And I put approved in there because we learned sometime last year from public safety that there are combustible evergreens. So we did not want those adjacent to the residence. So every 25 feet. And that the landscaping guidelines shall follow the soon to be adopted UDO. Currently, we have landscape guidelines that are just the conversation and dialogue that we have with the consultants. We've been very fortunate in the city of Jenks that the developers who come here want to do a quality project, and they have not, they've been willing to do what we have given them. And there's a tree list included in that. It will be a little bit different when we adopt the UDO. And so approving this tonight, per staff recommendation and planning commission, would require them to follow the landscape standards of the UDO. We had a very long conversation during the public hearing about setbacks budding our districts. So for the record, if you did straight zoning on this lot, the an office building or a commercial structure could be 10 feet from a residential property line. It does not change in the new UDO. That is the standard currently. That is the standard in the future. That is also the standard in the surrounding communities. Just a fact. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it just is what it is. So because the residents were very concerned about that, this development being an office warehouse and being so close to their property line, staff met with the mayor and some other counselors, and we talked about the impact that would have on our residents. And because of it being the west property line, felt like it was not unreasonable to ask the applicant to amend that portion of the PUD to 25 feet on the west boundary line and set it back 20 feet from the residence on the north. And the reason I say 20 feet along the residential line on the north is because about half of the property is abutting residential and the other half is commercial. So I did not think that it was reasonable to impose the 20 feet setback along the commercial portion. All stormwater. So in saying that about setback, that is a big deviation from the very long chart that I spent a lot of time on explaining the setbacks. So disregard the beautiful chart that I made. All stormwater to drain to Elwood, a commercial owners association to be established. Sometimes they call them a property owners association when you're dealing with commercial. That would be required, a vegetated buffer abutting the neighborhood on the west and north, and drainage language from the South Lake Village plat to the deed of dedication. So in planned unit development, and I will say this for the sake of the public and for any new counselors, when we bring a planned unit development before you, the question that you were asking this evening is for you to consider, if this land were to develop, is this a reasonable use? Is it supported by the comprehensive plan, which represents the vision of the city? And if so, because it's a PUD, do we have appropriate restrictions and allowances? Because when you do straight zoning, we don't get to negotiate some of the details. When you're within a PUD, the applicant wanted to make sure that they had a flexible site plan, which I think is reasonable. And they also wanted to make sure that they were allowed to do office warehouse. In this particular case, it's a 75% masonry, and there would be no outdoor storage, which I think is very important. And in return, we asked them primarily to do additional landscaping and to also add an additional setback along the west property line and the north. So if you look on page 85, talks about the planning data. It's currently ag. They're requesting PUD 130 and commercial shopping as the underlying zoning. The intended use would be commercial retail. We would love to see retail on the front along Elwood, and then office and the opportunity for warehousing. One of the reasons, and this is kind of just a side note, after going through a couple of commercial realty talks, I guess we'll call them dinners, luncheons, something, office warehouse has become, I'll use the word more common, I think, because of the way we do business, because there is so much online ordering. People are not necessarily, even if you go to Gap or something, literally they'll be like, well, let me see if we have that for you in the size you're looking for. You know, I just went along, but so they look it up, and that's probably an extreme. It's probably where the moms and pops who are needing to warehouse their merchandise on site rather than having it coming out of Dallas or something like that, so that they can have better customer service, they have better control over the goods and wares that they're trying to move. So with that being said, the general location is west of Elwood and north of Maine. At the bottom of page 2 of 7 or page 85 talks about the Vulcan area requirements in a commercial district. So I included local commercial, which is the LC commercial shopping, and then PUD 130. And again, the PUD was amended prior to the staff report. So the setback from abutting our district is simpler in that it's 10 feet at the north boundary where there's commercial, 20 feet on the north boundary adjacent to residential, 25 on the west boundary, and 10 on the south. On page 86, it shows the chart of uses that would be allowed by right in local commercial, commercial shopping, the PUD, and commercial general. We'll also see where they struck through use unit 1, 16, and 19, and where they made an exception that use unit 22, which allows for warehousing and wholesaling, there would not be anything to do with the medical marijuana. Currently, the screening requirement is a 6-foot opaque fence, and you would not be able to see through it, located along the north and west where the residential uses are. We do not require screening adjacent to similar properties. So if you have commercial adjacent to commercial, screening is not required. Lighting should be shielded down and away from the residential area. Street and parking lighting would not be taller than 19 feet. Parking, what they're asking for is 1 per 400 square feet of office area and 1 per 1,200 square feet of warehouse area. The elevations would be 75% masonry, and outdoor storage is prohibited. On page 88, there's a zoning map, so you can see everything north and adjacent to Elwood is already commercial. Everything south and adjacent to Elwood is already commercial. Then you have immediately to the west of all that commercial is residential. This is the request does fit the comprehensive plan. I believe the use poses an adverse effect or impact on the surrounding properties. The business park concept will allow for needed tax-based retail along Elwood and office warehouse uses in the rear of the property. On the bottom of page 5, which is also page 88, it goes over those conditions, which I already went through. And then I did separate them out on page 89. So the blue is the portions that the Planning Commission actually added to my recommendations. So Planning Commission and staff have had a public hearing, and after hearing from the public and hearing from the applicant, did recommend approval. Conditional approval of PUD 130 and rezoning request per comments and changing the zoning from ag to commercial shopping. On page 90, you can see the home. It doesn't really look like that right now. And then further down, you're going to see the commercial office that is a little bit further north from this lot. And then on page 91 starts the PUD. I did make available to the public a copy of the, there were limited numbers of copies, so I apologize, there's not a lot out there. But I, at your feet, a copy of the revised PUD. So this is Elwood Business Park. The picture that you see here is the business park further north. That is a very popular concept. It's 100% masonry, and I'd say that's probably the biggest difference between what they're asking versus what is built in this photograph. But 75% is a plot of masonry for a office warehouse use. Mr. Bell has highlighted on most pages in bold the changes that he made, and on page 6 of the document, it talks about minimum setback from west property line would be 25 feet. And I want to also clarify that when we talk about setback, we're talking about from grade to top plate. So that's literally the wall, not the roof. So if they chose to have a very tall pitched roof, that would be an additional height. But we're talking about from the grade to top plate. And minimum setback from the north property line, which is half office or about half office and half residential, 10 feet on the office portion and 20 feet adjacent to residential. I think that is pretty much it. On page 9, there is a conceptual site plan, and that would definitely be impacted quite dramatically by the imposition of the setbacks. So you would definitely not see this being built in the future.
So
Yes.
this is the one that I was talking to you about. Which is north on that particular, to the right?
To the right.
So
To
Elwood,
the right, so
So
Elwood is
Elwood
on
would be
the
to the
bottom
right.
of the page.
okay, that's all, thank you.
I have seen another plan that they brought in, just really confirming that we would be flexible with the site design. And I think that, that it is fair with the setbacks being changed midstream and actually they changed it twice now since we started this conversation. They've been willing to change it and work with the city. So anyway, you won't see the site plan, so. But in the site plan to the south, on this page is not the south, that is actually the east. One of the page is east, and the right is north. I think I believe that I covered everything I intended to cover. Do you have any more questions for me?
Any questions for Mrs. Hilton from the council? Am I right? Mr. Isbell? Fine. Mr. Murray? Did you mention earlier that the landscaping requirements did change since this was printed? Did I hear that correctly?
What I said was the condition of approval. If someone were to make a motion that says per staff comments, then it would require the landscaping to match whatever requirements are in the new UDO.
Okay. And
I do not think the PUD reflects them.
okay. So outside of what we have printed in our packet, the only change that's been made is we have the applicant has agreed to concede on the new recommended setbacks.
Right.
Okay. Is the public been made aware of that?
I left the PUDs out there and I did hand it to one person in particular that was talking in a small group, so I really really understood that at this point.
Okay. All right. Any last questions from Mrs. Hilton?
If I may, one
Yes.
question.
Yes, sir.
Will we see this again in the final form of final plat?
When it comes to planning, you will see it again.
Okay.
But
Record.
yes,
Thank you.
yes, it'll be, I was explaining, and I'll say for the public, a plat document is a legal document. It reminds me of a deed. It basically says, these are my boundaries. There's a north arrow, there's a scale, says how many acres, lot, block. It's going to give the deed of dedication, which will reflect the items in the PUD. And it's going to say, this is the pin of the property line, and we're going to go 300 feet this way, and et cetera, et cetera. You can enter here. There's no access there. It's a very, I call it nuts and bolts.
Does it require a vote?
We usually put it on consent.
Okay.
because
Consent agenda. Okay.
the biggest thing is the city accepts the easements.
Okay.
At the end of the day, that's why it comes to council. You're saying, staff's looked at it and says, yes, this does meet all the requirements of state statute, and these are the easements, and the city is accepting that, and stormwater language and all that.
Okay. Very well. Thank you, Mrs. Hilton. Does the applicant want to take an opportunity to speak? Yeah.
I promise. I just want.
Name and
My
record.
name's Robert Bell, 101 West U Street in Jenks, and mayor, members of council. I think this is a good development. Recognize that it's built with flexibility because things will change before it gets developed, and we don't know what that is. One thing I didn't hear Marseille mentioned, I know it's in the PUD, is the interior lot lines are zero lot development. And that way, the buildings can be attached if they so desire. I assume that probably these will be rented type facilities, but there is an opportunity for them to maybe divide it in zero lots line on structures itself, just like downtown Jenks at that point. I also want to say that the applicant and myself have been very proactive, and before the planning commission started, we agreed to everything that the staff's review was. At that point, we changed the application to reflect that. So when it was presented at the planning commission, it was presented the way everybody wanted it to be at that point. We'd since learned that we wanted to change the setbacks. We agreed to that, and the application was amended again and submitted today with those updated setbacks at that point. So if you guys have any questions of me after the public speaks or whatever, then I'm available. But so we're in agreement, and the PUD is submitted, and I think was passed out by Marseille, is exactly what everybody's in the planning commission and the city council is looking at. So
Any questions for Mr. Bell?
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bell. Just we'll go ahead and close the floor to the council, and we can invite any members of the public that'd like to speak on this matter. Please come forward. And if you would, ma'am, just state your name, first and last name, and address, and get started. Good evening. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Beth Oaks, Sullivan from West Eagle. Thank you for all your work on this project. Thanks for the work on the setbacks. We appreciate that. And my only question right now is one of the changes that they had here in bold. I think it's a change. The changes are in bold.
Page you on.
On page 5, it says that the state anticipate a low impact stormwater system will be created. So then my question now, what is that? What's a low impact stormwater system? Maybe just a better connected.
Page 5. Page 5, the new
That
one.
would be just,
Oh, the new document. Okay.
yeah, it would be
Oh, that one.
Little change.
part of the drainage study.
Yeah.
So impact development is what that's.
It's about fourth sentence in.
Okay, so your question is, what is a low impact stormwater system?
Yes.
Oh. Dang, good question. Anybody want to take a stab on that?
Mr. Wells.
Mr. Bell? Back up.
Again, Robert Bellinger, 111 Street. The low impact development with regards to stormwater, what we've normally seen in the city of Jenks is detention facilities and drainage and concrete paths and it gets into the creek system and out of the city through the rivers. When you talk about low impact development, you're talking more about having the stormwater go into like rain gardens on the site, more than just one large detention facility. Several deals that include landscaping also, and that is a kind of a difficult to achieve sometimes, and you don't see a lot of it at that point. This site is because of the sugar sand related to the area. This site is choice for that kind of use. So maybe we could have, instead of one large detention facility, several different size type detention that has landscaping in it and meter it to Elwood Avenue, because we're going to have to, there's not a lot of fall on the ground up there, but we're going to have to reverse the fall on this to get it to go to Elwood. So what we're going to have to do is move the front of the property on the dirt wise to the back and then grade it out to where it falls exactly the other way, about the same fall at that point. And all the sand out there, this will set up to where it drains off the building, and it may go into some overland paths to go from different landscaping areas and those usually include some rock and gravel and some other stuff. So that's not really the definition of low impact development that sort of is.
So it's not really a thing you install, it's just a methodology of using different tools and landscapes and rock and things to kind of move water the way you want it to move.
And at the rate of flow that we need to do it so it doesn't impact Elwood when it gets in.
Okay.
So you're gonna reverse the current form of gravity and make it come toward Elwood. And you said you're gonna grade the land by pushing the dirt to the west end of the land,
Yeah.
In theory.
in theory. What I'm getting at is if the west end of the building is 35 feet tall, but you raise it 8 feet to allow for the water drainage, it's going to be even higher than the 35 feet. That was what was going through my mind.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I don't think you're gonna see a 35-foot building out there. And if you drove to the church, out of Highway 75, those buildings in front of that are about 25 feet tall. And you're definitely not gonna see anything bigger than that on this property at that point. The other scenario is every house in South Lakes Villas was required to be raised 1 foot above the ground to get away from the stormwater that was associated with that sheet flow of that site at that point. And what this will actually, the south end of or the west end of this property is lower than the neighborhood at this point. And there's about 2 foot of flow or fall between. So if you reverse it, you're talking about raising the back 2 feet.
I think we're really getting out into the weeds
Yeah.
on the stormwater. I mean, Robert's not an engineer.
I'm not an engineer.
You're not an engineer. We're going to have engineers that have to work on this.
And his question, whether it raises the building up higher at that point, 25 foot is that is 50 feet away from their house at that point, or 45 feet away from their house.
Yeah, and I can appreciate the question. I don't think 8 feet is probably going to be extreme, but I could see a couple of feet. This is Oaks. Do you feel like your question was the question was adequately answered? So it's not a big contraption. It's not a tank. It's a methodology of using landscape and rocks and hard and softscapes to kind of move water and retain it.
Mhm. Yes, and I appreciate it because I was thinking the same about raising that back there, which was the next concern I had. There's development on either side of the property. Onto the north was developed with our neighborhood, and the new development just immediately south who raised their pads, and there's flooding in the backyards. And I just didn't want that same thing to happen to the same mistake, which we learned from that mistake.
Yeah.
And also, would they be willing to say the height to 25 feet? He said they're not going to proceed with the picture I met in the application.
But we can't ask them to.
Well, they said I'll put that out to you then.
Yeah.
He said he doesn't anticipate having flooding higher than 25 feet, so you could.
Robert, is it your guess that the structures are going to look very similar to what's out in front of the church, Kirkland, or Kirk Crossing?
I mean, I guess, well, and
Is we can't put that in writing and say,
well, if I could maybe,
yeah,
if you don't
absolutely.
mind, is that if this was straight zoning by right, they can put up a 35-foot structure, and we wouldn't have to necessarily have some of what they've given up with the setbacks, with the landscaping, and so I think that we're trying to do what we can for them to make some adjustments to what they want to do or what they can even do by right, and to say that now we're going to reduce what is allowed by code, which is the 35 feet to 25 feet. I just wouldn't want to push them away so that they leave the PUD process altogether. Yeah.
You probably should know better than that.
I'll say that we were developing our PUD, so whatever your normal code is for normal RS2, we might not have that setback on our neighborhood. So you're looking at, normal CS or whatever normal RS2 is, where we were at PUD, obviously, because our backyards are pretty close to our backyard fences. So there's that. But so my point was about 2 mistakes on either side of the property that have to be dealt with, especially with the kind of thinking the same thing could be happening here. So just need to end up letting this well, because it doesn't actually run through there. We found out through this application that it's running through the back. The stormwater says it is going through our system, it's looking towards the backyards of our properties that join this. So just, I think reversing that seems awfully expensive, but probably not as expensive as them paying their share of the detention on that anybody uses it is supposed to, which I understand you're still putting that language in there that if, I think that still says, it says they're going to Elwood, but then it turns around and will say, if they have to use our pond, then they'll pay their share, is that right?
Will be the language that is in the South Lake Villas
That anybody who uses it.
will be.
So if they end up having to use it, hey, this isn't working, we can't stick this and go to Elwood, guess what?
Correct. They will be aware.
So it is a possibility that it would come into us if they realize they can't facilitate stuff like that. Which in that case, we would require that they do a study to make sure that our detention pond can handle all the runoff that's going to come from the Smithco property and this property now, potentially. To do that. I already know that Smithco runoff there is going to do what our pond will contain. Handle. 20 years ago, they probably anticipated all this to be developed, torn out, but it hasn't been. And the rainfall's changed, especially more downpours all at once, so it fills up a lot faster very quickly. So that is all that. Thank you.
Have we done adequate job addressing your concerns? I know we got
I think so.
get a little off on drainage and.
Situation.
And I hope that,
I think the reality of the situation is that I don't really see that working with them going to Elwood without kind of causing, how are they going to build that really up? She can already see Elwood, the cars on Elwood from her backyard. And if they're raising further, I think, and the pad naturally goes higher when they build a pool, they build a pad. I just think it's going to be really super high if they try to make it go the opposite way that it is.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that it can't use our pond, but they just need to make sure that it can handle it.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Oaks. Yes, ma'am. How are you this evening?
I'm good, how are you?
Very well.
So I prepared all this stuff to talk about setbacks, which.
You can just have your
I don't need
name.
to, right? I'm sorry,
Start off your name.
I apologize.
No, you're good.
I'm new. My name is Emily Wagner and I live at 703 North Sycamore Street. I backed directly onto the tract of land in PUD 130.
Okay.
And I just want to verify that what's in the document, the 25 and the 20, I don't need to go through my whole spiel about why we should increase it. We're good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I brought letters from some other people that they wanted read, so I'm just gonna skip all of that. No need. I had two other things that I wanted to mention. I have no problem, obviously, with this being rezoned as commercial shopping. I think it's appropriate. I think it's a smart move. I know new business in Jenks is important, and I'm glad to see, especially now that they've changed the setbacks, that they really are taking into account the neighborhood, because that's important to us, and I appreciate that. That being said, I had, in addition to the setback, I had two questions that I was hoping maybe could be addressed or maybe modified in the plans. One of them was, with there being several lot lines that back commercial, if possibly the dumpsters could be put maybe adjacent to those instead of adjacent to the residential property. I don't know if that's a thing we talk about now. It was just a thing I wanted to toss out to the universe and hope would happen. So And the other one is possibly restricting business hours on the units to what I would say like normal business hours. With being really close to my house, I have small children who unfortunately had to be here tonight, who have early bedtime. So if there's a restaurant that has a 10 o'clock and they have music playing inside that you can hear every time they open their doors, or whatever the case may be, I was hoping for like normal business hour shopping, like the shops in downtown Jenks are, those type of business hours, would be something I would like to request to have those type of hours to kind of work on the noise levels and restricting those if possible. So that's all I had. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Go back to, what was number one again? What was
The dumpsters, well, my number one was
Okay.
cutbacks, but that's been done. The other one was having the dumpsters not be like along the back property line, because with commercial properties, you have a lot more often trash is dumped, a lot more trash that could potentially be stinky and attract rats and other rodents to my back fence line that there's a commercial property they could butt along, that they could put that there without impacting residents by having all their dumpsters drive along their line.
Yeah.
I don't feel like these are unreasonable requests.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Wagner. Anything else?
No.
Okay, I don't know that we have any right to restrict business hours. But we can certainly have the discussion about the dumpsters. But I can tell you that my participation is, if this ends up being anything like what I think it is, and this is just my guess, anything like what the same facilities we see in front of the church, Kirk, these aren't noise-making businesses, and I don't foresee a lot of in and out. And I will tell you guys, the good news in all this is that they brought a PUD here, which means they're willing to work with us. And compared to the last discussion we had about property nearby, this was far more agreeable and far more of a back and forth and a good negotiation than before. And I think it's because the applicant's representative knew of the history of the things that we failed to approve the first time. I would hope that you guys would remind me, this is a whole lot better than what we looked at a couple years ago. And frankly,
Straight zoning.
it's a whole lot better than us going by the book. If we were going by the book, this vote would have been done 20 minutes ago. This is a lot better than the mistake we made 2 years ago. Frankly, saying no to the previous decision it was a mistake. We shouldn't have disproved that by the letter of the law, which we become more familiar with as we spend more time here and we start to realize what we can and can't do. That was a mistake. So I would hope you guys would see this as a big win. Yesterday, as Mrs. Hilton mentioned, the council, two other counselors and I, actually the three of us that are here tonight, decided, let's make a last effort to kind of push this thing farther away from your homes. Because in my opinion, as soon as I saw this it was we knew this could not get approved. We just can't keep saying no to anything that happens in this area. We still have to maintain a somewhat friendly business community and be welcoming to things that make sense. So I don't feel comfortable at all with telling a business owner what time they can and can't close. But I do feel comfortable knowing that if this is anything like what I see out there at Kirk, I never see it. They're never there. They don't. Yeah, this is not a loud group. There's not people looking out the back windows that are looking into your yards. I really think this is kind of a blessing for what it ended up being. And I hope you guys in the end can see that. And I hope you'll agree with me that you weren't there yesterday, but the last minute we did push this farther away from you. And in this case, it probably is the best case scenario that we could get. Now, if the applicant wants to address dumpsters, we can do that for a couple minutes. Or we could simply hope that they do the right thing and maybe put the little wooden surrounds around the dumpsters, which kind of happens quite a bit.
In the PUD itself, there's a section in there addressing the dumpsters, and they're required to have the same type of material of the building, 5 foot high. And that is a structure, so therefore it's not 20 feet on the north line or 25 feet on the west line. More than likely, since I don't know what the roads are gonna look like and I don't know what the development I'm gonna have to stand on that, but since it is a structure, at least it'll be that far away from the neighborhood.
So you're saying this structure will obstruct the view of the dumpster?
It'll be 5 foot high.
Yeah. It's some kind of shield.
If you look in the back of Louis, that's a good example.
So it's something brick or wood that,
Concrete.
Concrete.
It's concrete block, I think.
Okay.
And this will be whatever the material is in the building.
thank you, Mr. Bell.
Could I ask-
I'm not aware, can we find that in the page? Do we see that anywhere? My eyes aren't working.
Well, is this an appearance review district?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, then it has to have the,
Yeah,
by,
it comes,
Yeah,
it comes back and.
yeah,
Okay.
anything has to have the enclosure.
Okay. Good.
Yes, good, especially knowing, I'm sorry, I make about that, but especially knowing that it follows the same setback rules. I didn't know if it didn't count, so they could still have it like right against my fence. So I knowing it has to be off the setback, that feels a lot better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you might have the prettiest dumpster you've ever seen.
It's about poison.
Yeah.
What's your view and comment, Mayor?
Yes, absolutely.
Has this developer developed anything else in the Jenks area?
No, he has purchased a piece of property on A Street. He has an approval to build some apartments. About that time was when the pandemic hit and everything going on hold, so.
Okay, thank you. And then if I might, Mr. Mayor, make a comment. For the audience, I know that you said that we turned down one before, did a lot of discussion on it, did a lot of thought and discussion into this one too. And we're not saying that the next project that comes next door to this one, if this is approved, that it's going to be automatically approved. We're going to go through the same process to make sure that your neighborhood is going to be protected, as with our engineers, our planning commission, our planner, and all the city staff. So just let you know that we're still going to look after you guys, and we appreciate you coming.
One of the things is I didn't want to put in the PUD that we would, if they wanted me to put, if it went to the neighborhood, or stormwater went to the neighborhood, we'd pay the dues. I didn't want to put that in there. I brought that up with Marseille. And so the way it's worded is it says, the PUD says, if they decide in the future that water can go that way, they'll be subject to the dues of the development, so.
Who's they? The HOA?
Yeah.
The property.
Okay,
owners.
property, okay. All right.
Mr. Bell, one more thing. I just want to reiterate one point that was made earlier. The fact that the front portion of the building is commercial and the back portion of the building would be warehousing, which would mitigate any sound of the businesses to the neighborhood in the back, correct? With regard to the hours of operation and the noise and things like that.
I think we've made a lot of changes in here, and I don't think anybody's landed on a design. I think what we did originally thought was we'd have a road down the middle. And then we looked at having a building down the middle and the road all the way around it. And there's been some talk about pushing the building completely away from the residential and have it up against the property to the south. If that happens, then most of the stormwater will probably, along with some of the utilities, go along the property line, and the road will be in that direction, and parking will be out the front. So there's a lot of different options in there.
I was trying to find a happy ending for the noise of the businesses, having the commercial in the front, the warehouse in the back, but we're not to that point.
Well, if it makes anybody, there's all along Elm Street from B Street to 91st Street on the east side of the road is office, warehouse, and some just warehouse, and it backs up to residential neighborhoods. At 91st Street, there's warehouses right across the street and right next to apartments, and we haven't, received any complaints about noise or refuse or anything like that. So compared to like something like the Riverwalk or a gym where people are screaming and grunting, those are what we have received complaints on, but we haven't received any complaints on the office warehouse uses next to residential. So
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. We can close the floor unless anyone has any. Yes, ma'am.
Can you clarify the comment about the drainage language, with some sort of qualification that if it was approved to go to us, then it would be, but it didn't need to have that qualification, it just needs to say, if they ever use our pension fund, we'd be paid. It shouldn't.
No, I
be
think
based on-
he said if they ever allow.
It's a part of your PUD that you must be paid if they're using your detention pond. So the fact that that hasn't been happening,
But it's also in our deed that it has to be in their covenants. It says in there, it says it has to be in writing for them, in their paperwork. That's not see why.
You approve for staff recommendation, it says add drainage language from South Lake Villas to plat deed of dedication. That's not negotiable. It will be in the deed of dedication. It is not required to be in the PUD. I'm comfortable with whatever language Mr. Bell has put in the PUD. When it comes time for platting, it will be in the deed of dedication document.
Would you like to help us figure out how we're going to make this motion? Because one of the four of them is going to do it.
well, isn't it as,
Is it with all the stated conditions that we have? Is it as simple as that? Do we need to add anything?
including,
Per the.
Yeah, the motion. Yes.
Submitted version from Mr. Bell and staff and planning commission.
You don't need specific wording about the setbacks or anything.
As long as it says for the most recent submitted PUD.
For the most recent submitted PUD. Okay. Anything else, gentlemen, ladies? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Take a stab at what you just said. Mr. Isbell, you've been around long.
I'll make a motion to, no, I'm making a joke, sorry. Let me find the agenda item specifically.
Number 3.
3. I'd like to make a motion that we approve JC 21 PUD 130 by Bell Land Use LLC, a zone change from AG agricultural to planned unit development 130 with an underlying zoning of CS commercial shopping, general location 9330 South Elwood Avenue as amended in the most recent documentation.
Second.
You have a proper motion and a second for approval of item number 3. Let's vote, please.
Klein? Yes. OJ?
Yes.
Isbell?
Yes.
Murray? Yes. Mailbox?
Yes. Item 4, ordinance number 1563 relating to JZ 21 PUD 130, approving the zone change to commercial shopping and planned unit development 130, page 136. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have proper motion and a second on item number 4. Let's vote, please.
Klein? Yes. OJ?
Yes.
Isbell?
Yes.
Murray? Yes. Mailbox?
Yes. Item 5, approve the emergency clause for ordinance number 1563.
So moved.
We have a proper motion and a second. Vote, please.
Klein? Yes. OJ?
Yes.
Isbell?
Yes.
Murray? Yes. Mailbox?
Yes. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Good job. All right. Item 6, vote to enter executive session to engage in confidential communications between a public body and its attorney pursuant to Title 25, Section 307B4 concerning pending claim or litigation. Upon the advice of the attorney, that disclosure will seriously impair the ability of the public body to process the claim or to conduct pending litigation. We have to vote to enter executive session. I have a motion, please.
Motion to enter executive session. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Vote, please.
Klein? Yes. OJ?
Yes.
Isbell?
Yes.
Murray? Yes. Mailbox?
Yes. And for those of you that are staying, I don't anticipate will be that Council has returned from executive session at approximately 7:30. No votes were cast. And we are on to other business. City manager's report.
Mayor and all members of council, we had a pretty neat scenario that took place, I guess that was 2 weeks ago, Jason? Okay, we had some break-ins at, I guess it's a CBD marijuana dispensary west of 75, and it happened. Do you mind coming up? You have the video of this, but we had multiple break-ins at a dispensary, and one of our officers got the drone out, I guess, during the evening. And Jason, maybe you can explain this.
So on September 11th, we had another break-in, but we'd had these two weeks in a row on the same Friday night at roughly 2 in the morning. So Sergeant Chanley we had recently got him a new drone that has pretty good thermal capabilities, and if we'll start playing that, they just decided to park the drone over top of the business. And if you'll start playing that, if you'll look in the upper, kind of right in the center, you can see a figure walking across the grass between the highway, and now it's getting ready to come up to the little concrete drainage. So they were able to watch this individual walk all the way across, kind of hit the little tree line there, and then come across to the, can you guys see it?
No, can Brandon show it in the mouse?
Is it moving?
Yeah, if you can I see your
Yes.
mouse?
Oh, it is playing.
Yeah. So if you will look, he's walking across the street right now, but let me back this up because the concrete is hotter. But the individual's right here, and there's a little ghost boiler moving right
See.
here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So he walks across the street, and he gets over here to the grass. You can see him over here. And this is gravel, so again, hotter. This was not the best color palette for this, so it kind of showed us that we needed to do a little training with the officer, because this was brand new, one of the first times he flew this. But in all, if you see the suspect walking right there, he walks out and across here. I think I backed it up a little bit. He's right up next to the building, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
He breaks the front glass, but you see him right here. So
Yeah.
he walks through there, and then he breaks the front glass up here in the front, which again, color palette choice really kind of got us, and maybe Nick's listening to me. He'll probably figure it out by now. But if you'll see there, the patrol car pulls up, and they get him. So,
Pretty cool.
so this would probably have not been possible. I mean, they probably would have never seen this guy walking in the dark and doing that just with the naked eye. The thermal imaging is a big game changer. And the ability to park that right there, that guy never had any idea. Now, subsequently, we served a search warrant on the individual's house and took his computer, and right before this, he Googled how to break into a weed shop and how to break into glass. And, because he's really with the Glenville Police Department. So,
You didn't delete his search history, huh?
Where's the location at again?
Yeah.
so this is the old Kendrick firework plant. This is Mariachi's. It's right here.
Oh, okay.
So, Glenwood South is where he came from. This is Highway 75.
Single place.
Oh, it's the new nice CBD play. Okay.
And Brandon, I may have closed whatever tabs we did with.
If I was gonna break into one, that'd be the one
Is that the one you get, Golden Lotus or something? I don't know.
Lotus Gold,
Lotus Gold, thank you.
best.
Does anybody have any questions about any of that before we walk off?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Not related to this, but do you require the officers to do certain hours of training with drones? And can we do it as a public service to youth sports, baseball, lacrosse, things like that, for their marketing campaigns?
Yes, we could work that. We have done some stuff in the last week or so for the big school and work with the band director on some stuff that he needs. But if anybody has a need like that, then there's plenty of us, either with PD or fire, that we can make that happen.
Okay, I'll get in touch.
Public, servants. No,
I'll introduce you. Okay.
I'll volunteer.
Let me speak for her. What she said was, Gary's a great guy, and
Thank you, Mr. Isbell.
Okay.
I'm in hungry, let's roll. Okay, the incog report, Mr. Isbell.
yes, I have one.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chris, were you finished?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Thank you. Incog report, Mr. Isbell.
Our last incog meeting was September 14th. They opened it up with a staff report discussing congestion, air mitigation, charging stations, the things that future looking with regard to the city, the region, incog. The priorities of the cities, the counties, and the schools with regard to the specific needs, excuse me. That was followed with the air quality report, TulsaAirQuality.com. We had 4 exceedances this summer. We should be in good shape for our annual reporting with regard to air quality. We have had no ozone alert days since mid-June. The discussion about reducing parts per million counts in exceedance in the coming years was discussed. The EPA may drop the ppm for metropolitan cities, and if they do, we will be right on the cusp. So we're going to have to do some improvements if they decrease those numbers in the coming years. Parts per million.
I'm surprised that we haven't had any ozone days in this summer. I mean, we used to have them seem like all the time, and it's been so.
Driving around last year.
Oh, I guess that's true. That's true. It's been so hot. I would think the conditions would be right for it, but.
And with, somebody did ask the question with regard to the fires north and west of us, if that is impacting our air quality, and the answer was no. Not at the measuring stations throughout the metro. But this year we're in good shape. We'll see what next year does. The next item is the Transportation Improvement Program amendment to include a project connecting 57th Street West to Edison Street at the Gilcrease Turnpike exit. The state is putting in 4.8 million. I'm sorry, federal money is at 4.8 million and local money is 1.2 million to complete that project. The executive director of OML came out and spoke with us, Mike Fina. He is the municipal liaison to the governor's office for the CARES and ARPA monies with regard to cities, communities, and states. The 3 things he did go over were basically, if you want money, sign up. Requesting aid, the money will be available within approximately a week if you have all the information submitted correctly and completely the first time. And with respect to people that have applied for the CARES money, they usually had most of the information necessary to apply it to the ARPA monies. There was 10 billion approved. The 10 billion provided for broadband, and that would be a future allocation. So I don't know how we would address that, but there's $10 billion out there available. And all spends, since they come from the Treasury, would be audited. So that's something to keep in mind with regard to the CARES at ARPA money. One big takeaway, which was an interesting discussion, was the fact that ARPA funds can be consolidated by metropolitan areas. If the city of Jenks and Glenpool both get monies, they can consolidate them and go after state and federal funding, matching funds to complete a project to benefit both communities. Basically an economy of scale for matching funds. And this website to get information on ARPA is oklahoma.gov/ARPA. The next item was the 2020 Census Overview. The city, county, state redistricting will be announced in November. Legislative redistricting in mid-December. Current census information, the state of Oklahoma, 3.959 million people. Oklahoma City, 1.425 million. And Tulsa, 1,015,000, 1.015 million. And Tulsa is the 55th largest city in the metro United States. With regard to the state of Oklahoma, there were 50 counties that had reduced populations in the census, while there were only 27 counties that gained in population. Questions, comments?
No, sir. Great, thank you, sir. Any committee reports? Not, and no mayor's report tonight. Take a motion to adjourn if one available.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for adjournment. So please.
Klein?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Isabel? Yes. Murray? Yes. Mayor Box?
Yes, adjourned at 7:40 PM. Call to order the Jenks Public Works Authority meeting. Roll call, please.
Klein? Present. Stewart? Wojciak? Okay. Isabel? Present. Murray? There. Chair Box?
Here. Item number 1, consideration of appropriate action relating to a request for approval of consent agenda.
To approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second for item 1. Vote, please.
Klein? Yes. Wojciak?
Yes.
Isabel? Yes. Murray? Yes. Chair Box?
Yes. Full item number 2. Mr. Shrout, anything additional in your general manager's report?
No, sir.
Driscoll? Good evening, sir. How are you?
Thank you. Very good. Mr. Chairman, members of the majority, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. A couple of quick things I want to touch on, just it's a little bit early since we typically do these things a month in review. The leadership Jenks application period is ended. We have 15 accepted applicants, so we'll know early next week if all of them will continue with the program, but we look forward to starting that in October. So it'll be a good group of folks. As many of you are aware, we had our Main Street Bash event this past weekend, Saturday on Main Street. It had 153 cars. Was the final number, Councilor Isabel. Councilor Isabel and Murray showed up, and then Mayor Boggs got to choose the mayor's choice award for the car. So that was a fun thing. But I do want to take the opportunity, the Jenks FFA students came and volunteered that day and were a lifesaver for us. So we're very grateful for that, and we are going to be feeding them pizza this Thursday. So yeah, a great group of kids. So if you have any volunteers, give them a call. Just a quick review of the print or the email report you've got on the business checkup. You'll notice our businesses are still, or 100% the revenue is growing and maintaining. So I think that speaks to the strength of our businesses. The other thing to look at once again is the workforce question. With 60% of our businesses saying they can't get employees. So we're working with some of our regional partners and trying to start a conversation about maybe there's shared resources across. So it's not just a Jenks silo, a Broken Arrow silo, and a Wasso and so forth. So we're just trying to make sure we can do everything we can to get employees to these businesses, and it's across the board. It's a service industry, it's specialized industry. It's a problem.
They tried like
a lot of them have, and then a lot of them it's just for some of the hourly employees. It's not as it doesn't make sense to.
Well, I mean, they have some that are on, they have like,
Yeah.
we're just kind of curious.
I think it's been all over the board in terms of what they've tried and not tried. It's if it makes us feel better, everyone's having this problem. It's not just this us. So I think Chris talked about it in the aquarium meeting previously. They're struggling with that. And if you look, just one more thing on that, what one change would make your business more successful. The biggest bulk there is improvement in the overall economy. So I think what we're seeing is that there's still some hesitation about some consumer spending in some sectors.
I do have a question about that report specifically. What one change would make your business more successful? And almost 30% was in the other category. I mean, was there anything you could break out of the other categories?
Yes. Do you get all the category word? Give me 1 second, I can pull it up for you.
Okay, thank you. Because there were 3 topics that had 0.
Yeah.
And I was thinking you might displace them with other opportunities.
And while you're looking for that, Counselor, you had a question about the sales tax report. You know, we had our largest sales tax check ever. And you had asked, you know, to what do we think, or what can we attribute, you know, the increase? And I think that what Robert has looked at, some of the, so like of the, is it top 20 or top 40? Top 40 sales tax producers, like, you know, our grocery stores, utilities, things like that, they really surged, you know, during the pandemic, and they've gone down a little bit. But what we've seen is all of those businesses outside the top 40, like all the smaller businesses that probably weren't doing as well during the pandemic, have really and so while the top 40 is down a little bit, but say over the last 6 months or maybe even year over year, they've still held steady enough that all these other businesses outside the top 40, they're coming back strong now. And so that's what we think we attribute some of this. And, you know, and we still continue to have, you know, gradual incremental growth in our sales tax producers. So, but which I think goes to, you know, what you were talking about with, you know, some of the business checkups you've been doing.
Yeah, and Zach's been doing these, so I've filled in a couple of them, but Counselor, the biggest issues we're hearing with the other, of course, it's a grab bag. Food costs, especially in the restaurant industry, has been brutal. And then shipping delays have been a fairly common thing we've heard as well. So it's just an across the board a grab bag of not great news.
That's good information to have. But I mean, yeah, you're finding the problems, obviously. Shipping, deliveries, truck drivers, supply chains.
And then just a couple of quick notes on here. Counselor Murray put us in contact with a local gas station tire auto repair place that Zach spent a lot of time working with them. Pretty high-end operation. Counselor Short is familiar with them as well, but we're continuing to converse about potential locations at Jenks. They're looking at expanding. It's a pretty nice setup. I've never might haven't been in, but Zach spent maybe an hour and a half there a couple of weeks ago. So
What are they called?
meters. I don't think we're gonna, so a few other just notes in there. We've got a couple of businesses looking to expand and been working with. One of them, Marseille's done a lot of work with related to your medical office. The mayor's going to touch on that a little bit tomorrow in his State of the City address. And with that, I will end there. I will note just a couple of quick upcoming events. The State of the City is tomorrow with the mayor. We have a LinkedIn masterclass coming up on October 7th, and then our Trick or Treat Main Street event will be Friday, October 29th, 4 to 6, if you would like to hand out candy to children.
That's a lot of fun. That is a fun event. I've done it a couple of times with youth sports. And,
for a community building event, it's really one of the fun. We see a lot of kids that are excited, especially special needs kids who have trouble with loud enclosed spaces. We see a lot of it. So it's a fun evening.
Can you get the drones over?
Probably. We probably won't either this year because my daughter's getting familiar with USA. We'll discuss.
Any questions for Mr. Driscoll? Very well, thank you, sir. Got a motion?
I'm sorry. Sorry. What happened to the liquid refill place on Main Streets? Just noticed the other day that it's like this.
We are working with the land or the building owner to find the new tenant. It just didn't work out there. The foot traffic for their very niche market didn't work out.
All right, thank you.
$40 for a gallon of laundry detergent doesn't work out so well either. Any motions to adjourn? Yeah.
Second.
Motion and a second for adjournment, so please.
Fine. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Isabel. Yes. Sorry. Yes. Chair.
Yes, we are adjourned.